Hello and welcome to Not Just Ads. Brian Morrissey is the founder of the Rebooting and the former president and editor in chief of DigiDay, but also one of the most respected and outspoken voices in the media and digital advertising industry. This time we bring on screen one of our chats, usually happening over lunch or in front of a coffee. I hope you like it. Hi, Brian. Welcome, I would say, back to Not Just Ads. This is the second
Yeah.
episode that we
Yeah, we
record
gotta
that
find we gotta find that in the bowels of Riverside. I think it's like the lost tape of like the Beatles or something.
nobody will know about it. We will know. Are you back from Sicily?
Yeah, I'm back from Sicily. Spent a couple weeks in your homeland, and I really like it a lot. I think we can talk later about La Matanza and what went on in the Toneriss because I think that actually I saw a lot of parallels with the publishing industry of the last 10, 15 years.
This is a very, very good image. So it's a very bad image, but a very good
For those
analogy.
who do not know, do not speak La Matanza. What is like? It's basically like a massacre. Like it's how they used to, I think, harvest tuna, and it's a very gruesome
It's a
process.
bloodbath, literally. But by the way, I'm from the north, so like around 1,000 kilometers from there, and it's part of the past, I guess. But yes, it's a very interesting analogy. And talking about the industry, let's start about the topic, the hot topic of the industry. But I swear it will be just for a little bit because
No problem.
I'm getting tired about it. So DOJ versus Google.
Yeah.
And I don't believe in conspiracy theorists. I don't believe in a 15 years old cunning plan, but I believe in the fact that Google is dominant, and this is an unsustainable situation for the industry.
Google's defense, first of all, in these antitrust cases, the first thing that you do is you try to the person who's accusing the government that's accusing a company of abusing a dominant position will try to narrow it to a specific sector. And then if you're ever accused of antitrust violations, you're just going to say, no, 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 no. Actually, you should be looking at the industry far larger. And then you just keep widening the circle until it's basically all of humanity and all of human activity. And you're like, we're just a small part of human activity. And that's basically what Google is doing. I mean, they're clearly, and I mean, this is like saying that the sky is blue. They clearly have had a dominant position in the display market, and particularly the automated ad sales, because they operated on all sides of it. Even their own, which is great with the discovery, because even their own executives, who should know better about using email. This is why Trump doesn't use email. Are saying that, okay, this is like Goldman or Citibank owning the New York Stock Exchange. There's clear conflicts in that. It clearly is a sign of a dysfunctional market, and also. At the same time, we need to hold these two thoughts in our head at the same time. It clearly is a sign that Google stitched together all the pieces of a very fragmented ad tech landscape. A ton of money went into ad tech in the sort of I don't know, like 2008 to 2015 era. I mean, I know at Digiday, like that was like timing is everything, and that company was really funded by VC companies. At the end of the day, the money just flowed from into those logos on Terry Kawaja's slide, and then once they hit their Series B, they added a marketing department, and it was a game of musical chairs. And so they wanted to be one of the people that got one of the final chairs or got bought by Google, and so they poured money into marketing expenses, and that's why a lot of these industry publications are so ad tech focused. Frankly, it doesn't necessarily match up with the conversations you have with the people running these organizations. I mean, the people who are in charge of indirect revenue are really into it, and they should be, right? But this weird situation got created where it was to me, it's like an illusion that this is, the be all and end all of media. It simply is not. But you can create realities as much as you want. And so what I think is this kind of runs the risk of, and this usually happens in antitrust, of generals fighting the last war, right? Like, I mean, we're fighting about display advertising, about automating the putting banner ads on the open web websites. I mean, come on. That's not where the market is going. I mean, look at the growth of retail media. You think that's all coming from shelf takers and co-op budgets? Absolutely not. And the best ad products have been created by walled gardens, not by this programmatic ad archipelago. You
are really preaching to someone that really doesn't believe that the programmatic open marketplace is the future, and I don't think it should have been even the past.
So I mean, like, in some ways, like, what comes out of this? I mean, look, I think I had Ari Paparo. I always want to call him Ari, and I feel so bad, but it's Ari. Ari Paparo on my own podcast, and Ari is he's doing a great job with architecture. I love it because he's been in the rooms. He was at DoubleClick when Google bought it, and I think what Ari was saying was basically that spin-off GAM. Like, I mean, Google is fighting existential battles with what AI is doing, with AI slop in their search engines, with the first credible, basically different approach to the 10 blue links that has created the best economic engine that's ever been on Earth, right? GAM, this stuff, this is not worth the juice is not worth the squeeze, as they would say at some point. And it's crazy to think of a $31 billion business, but that is the level that they're operating on. The search antitrust case is way more, frankly, interesting, way more consequential. And this stuff is, it's interesting to us on a very tactical level. But I don't see that this is not some existential threat to Google whatsoever.
I agree, and so I'll move to something that we had. We
can still talk about header bidding.
No, please.
Dynamic allocation.
No. And
what have you thought of I want to know, like, what have you thought of? Because to me, the big takeaway of this has been all the emails. I love lawsuits, and I love regulatory action, mostly for the unearthing of the emails, right? And like, there have just been so many great emails. I mean, the one I just saw today was, them slamming an ad exchanger reporter as stupid, right?
Yes.
And I know this was a guy. I know this was a man. I would be shocked if it was not a man. And of course, they were attacking a female journalist as stupid. And I promise you they wouldn't do that to a male. Nobody should use email. I think that is the biggest takeaway, right? Like, no, do not put it in email. I used to always say though, that if back in like 2000, with all the Russia stuff, like if they really want to destabilize American societies and stuff, they would just figure out a way to hack Slack and publish all the stuff that is within everyone's Slack. Like, I mean, it would cause like societal collapse because all the shit talking would come out.
Well, I think that most countries, though, from that perspective, that's why we should always meet face to face, talking about the past. And can you show your T-shirt, please?
Oh yeah, this is a Prism T-shirt. Which
I didn't know what Prism was.
It was a regional sports cable network in the Philadelphia area to show Philadelphia sports. And really, Philadelphia area was the beginning of the cable, at least the American cable industry.
They would be fully on CTV now.
Yeah, probably. And look, that's part of it. I mean, you see, the game has moved on to CTV, right? It's moved on to these other channels. I mean, nobody, I don't see many people, funding companies to try to, make a lot of money off of the display ad market. I mean, it's going to become, particularly on open programmatic, it just doesn't, it's hard for me to see that as the future. I think a lot of these things, whether it's curation, can lead to an improved environment. I think that anything that changes the dynamic, it should in the long term be good. But again, it's another be careful what you wish for. Google was a very imperfect, but mostly benevolent dictator, right? If you control the distribution of the internet, okay, and you're sending all of this traffic that publishers depended on to make money, if you think about it, it really does make sense that Google would say, hey, we're going to send you all this traffic. We're also going to take a piece. We're going to take a piece. We're not going to charge you for the traffic or any of that necessarily. But when you show them ads, you're going to use our system. And this has been from the beginning. I can remember that Google, with AdSense, they had this early competitor called Sprinks, I believe it was. Okay, and they had about.com, which ended up becoming, Dotdash down the line. And they just basically, they were sending, all of About's business was a search business. And then About was saying, we're going to monetize it with one of your competitors. No. I mean, come on, that's being obnoxious. I can see the point of them saying we're going to take a piece on all this traffic we send.
But there is the potential, although I see it as a rush to the top, curated marketplaces, media alliances, there is the risk, I think, of history repeating itself with a more premium commoditization of media owners. They have a huge opportunity to have a better management of their assets. And media alliances is a way to build a curated marketplace, let's say, that they own and control.
Yeah.
But if they don't work together, then someone else will do it. And so
this is where the European versus American friction
Exactly.
Because I feel like I have some European sensibilities. I like vacation, for instance. But I just do not have any faith in publishers being able to organize themselves. I mean, there's a lot of legal hurdles, at least in the United States, to that, and you see this with Elon Musk and the lawsuit about GARM. It's difficult to organize among competitors in a market. The reality is the competitors are not among other publishers. The competitors are clearly platforms and the grocery store chains and all of retail media.
Yes, although in Europe there are entities that are alliances. The problem is you cannot treat it as one of your many ways of selling inventory. It has to be a sole point of entry to buy that inventory, creating exclusivity, scarcity. If then the advertiser or the media agency knows that they can buy the same inventory elsewhere cheaper, or you name it, then it's becoming a lot of
I had
effort.
this conversation on one of my other podcasts, People versus Algorithms, and I do it with Troy Young, who used to be the president of Hearst magazines. And I was going through, I was like, oh, this Google trial, I was doing this long setup, right? And Troy, very on brand, is just like, oh, this is so boring. I'm like, okay, this is great. I really appreciate that. And he basically came then with like the goods, right? It was like, and it's the publisher perspective you rarely hear. They're just like, this is all just parasitic. And, from the beginning of ad networks or anything else, publishers want to sell their own inventory. They do not want to have some other person between them and their customer relationship, okay? And the only reason that this is being foisted on them, they'll never, ever, ever want this. Truly, they will not want it.
But if you think, taking a step back, looking at the bigger picture, looking at all the diversification of revenue streams, the damage that a bad advertising implementation, a bad user experience, intrusive formats, etc., 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 causes to all the other channels. It gives you an idea on how the future has to be different.
Well, if you think about the how many billions of dollars have gone into this ecosystem, right? I mean, I can remember rocket fuel with its like NASA engineers and all this stuff like this. And I just can't help but take a step back and maybe open my browser and go on the open web and think, wow, that's what we got? Like, really? I mean, forget about flying cars. Like, I mean, that is the result of all of this. Now, look, a lot of people have made a lot of money off of architecting this overly complicated, opaque system. What I note is that publishers are not among those people who have made a lot of money off that. Okay, I don't need to understand the intricacies of dynamic allocation and first look and all of that stuff. Just use common sense. This has been a disaster for publishers. This system has been a disaster.
Back to the DNA, to their DNA, audience centricity, and the product is content, is not the ad slot. And that's, I think, that I always say, we need to go back to the foundations, to the basics, fix the basics, and then start again. Yeah. And I hope, as you were saying,
like, who has the yachts in Cannes? It's not the publishers. Some like
not anymore.
It was
a couple in the past. But to close on this and the obstacles to overcome this situation, I go back to an exchange that we had on LinkedIn a couple of months ago, where basically I was mentioning the fact that in the industry there is this approach where you don't have to criticize, you need to highlight the positives while trying to sweep the issues under the carpet. And I think it is an issue. And I'm reading here to remember exactly what I said. I said that to drive change, we need to call out what's wrong, but it's not just about criticizing it. It's about protecting and elevating those doing the right thing, to which you commented incentives. Yeah. It usually doesn't take peeling the onion many layers to understand those critics are just talking their own books. They have no interest in sunlight because they either make money in the shadows or at risk of losing credibility if the overall credibility of the ecosystem is dented. You can argue. Did you write that
or did I write that? I agree with that.
Yeah, you wrote it.
I know, I'm just kidding. I was like, oh, this sounds right on.
You can argue this
the problem is if you write a lot is like you're sometimes I'll read stuff and I'll be like, yeah, I agree with it. I was like, oh wait, I wrote this.
It happens to me at a much smaller scale, but that's what happens to me. And so you said most people make decisions based on short-term benefits. So my question is, how do you think that we can beat this approach? So are we condemned to move on with a handbrake on forever, having theatrical dynamics where everybody knows his part and knows also the end of the story already, so we are just playing a part? How do we beat that and make sure that the good succeed ultimately against the bad? And I think that we are going back to the reliance on ad tech. That to me is the biggest, the link to certain business models.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's easy to be pessimistic about it, but I think that overall we're seeing a lot of publishers diversify their businesses away from this. I don't, we do surveys of publishers a lot at the Rebooting, and we ask I just did one where we asked people, what area are you seen as like the biggest, like, biggest potential for growth, right? And we said video advertising, programmatic, subscriptions, and it was subscriptions was 50%, and all the other ones added up. Programmatic was like a little bit more than a rounding error. These were news publishers. So I don't think that any sensible publisher, again, if you're creating original content, okay, not if you're just some arbitrage publisher. No offense to my arbitrage publisher friends, but if you're creating original content, okay, let's say you're a news publisher with a newsroom, you are not betting your future on this ecosystem. You just are not. And it is, whether that's going to be direct sold, whether that's using the pipes to have like, just to ease the transactions, that's fine, who cares? But this kind of indirect advertising, at least what I see, it will go back to being, an incremental part of most of these models. I don't see the New York Times, which is always held up as the shining beacon, right? Because it's the exception to the rule. They're not dependent on programmatic advertising. By the way, I've noticed it's crept back in. Like they made a big deal about shutting it off, and guess who's back? It's back. Okay, that hasn't gotten covered, I don't think, as much in Digiday, but it's back, and but go to the earnings reports. I mean, listen to the calls. I mean, Meredith is not like bragging about how their programmatic yield is up, but someone like Dotdash Meredith with their model, they're able to make it work, right? But they're also like building their own first-party data tool, with what is that, Decipher, and they're executing really well, right? They're not a technology company, as Neil will proudly say, but they use technology in the service of media, and yeah, they're able to work programmatic fine, but that's not. Even that business is not betting its entire future on this indirect model. So I just think that is the direction of travel. The programmatic industry will continue because there's millions and millions and millions of websites, right? And this game has always been to try to use the marquee publishers, and then next thing you're below the fold on some Korean porn site. That, by the way, that is not an analogy that I made up. That's an analogy that was actually said by one of the founders of Invite Media, okay, which Google bought and became DoubleClick, became the bid manager, and and he moved on to cure cancer. Right, he has a cancer data and analytics company, but he was joking with one of his other co-founders. He's like, running batter ads below the fold on Korean porn sites. I just don't see. I don't see that as the future for a lot of premium publishers.
I completely agree. I'm optimistic too, but I think. And back to my question, I think we could go much faster if we didn't have to fight this legacy infiltration across publishers as well. Because if we were working together on that report, I would have said,
we can.
Okay, I mean, on the answer, no, analyzing the answer, I would have said, okay, who did answer that question? Or is someone from the advertising team, or it's someone from subscription team? Because I can see, I go following the different channels. So I go to the ad tech advertising event, and then I go to the subscriptions and product events, and
yeah, that's true.
The people are completely different, and you talk to them, and they might be from the same companies, and they all think that they are in charge of their monetization.
Yeah, I mean, they're totally different conversations. That's completely correct. Sometimes you feel like you're like, wow, is this these the same companies, right? Because, and that's, I think the biggest, one of the biggest challenge with these publishing businesses is like they're really operating several different businesses at the same time. You know, they've got an affiliate operation that's totally different from their core product, right? I mean, they're just drafting off of their their brand name and their positioning in the search distribution channel.
But back to audience centricity, that's I think the recipe.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I see is a lot of publishers are taking an audience-centric approach. Then that's the only way, in my view, that you cut through all of these. You basically have misaligned incentives within the own organization. I mean, it's something I'm writing about for tomorrow about tension. You're always going to have these tensions within a publishing organization because you're going to have tensions between editorial and sales. You're going to have tension if you're a news publisher between mission and like revenue. You're going to have a tension between subscriptions and advertising. I mean, immediately when you implement a subscription strategy, like then all of a sudden, the sales team is like, hey, you can't do this. You're gonna like kill our advertising business. I saw this at Digiday. I'm like, dudes, we have like 70% unsold advertising, and now all of a sudden you're like protecting the inventory. Maybe you should have sold it the previous like 10 years.
But back to our previous never published conversation. I think that that's the weakest point, is a strategy that is not a strategy. You can't have an advertising strategy, a subscription strategy, an event strategy, a data strategy, an editorial strategy. So they need to be stepping stones and halfway objectives to reach an overarching goal. Yeah. And that's like, where boards are failing, I think, in many companies today.
Well, it's like I see like more people talk about it. Maybe it's like maybe FT Strategies serves credit
FT Strategies, the
with the North Star. I talk with a lot more people, and they talk about their North Star, and it's hard to get to, and there's always going to be exceptions like made, I feel like, in these complicated businesses where, by necessity, you're constantly just looking for the latest hack to chase for short-term revenue. I mean, I don't blame anyone for doing that, right?
No, but it's short-term revenue gives way to the eternal, perpetual cycle of emergency, as I call it. Yes, short-term strategy leaves you weaker. Something else happens. You take another short-term strategy and then a short-term approach.
Yeah, you're on the treadmill, and you're not looking down the road. You're just looking to try to make the next quarter and the next quarter.
But speaking from a personal experience, having working a lot with FT Strategies, having run some programs on the North Star framework, I've met many medium and small publishers that only needed to have someone talking to them about that and love the approach, and they are still in touch, updating on how things are going. So yes, it's difficult, but also it's all about willingness from the boards, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's also having simpler businesses is probably better in publishing. Like, I mean, I can remember during the Vice bankruptcy, the corporate org chart that got like published, and it was just like, holy shit, look at how over-architected and complicated this business is. And to me, it's similar, like a lot of business models, again, when you're chasing incremental revenue, are, you're just going to have that misalignment inevitably if you're trying to do 7 or 10 different things at the same time. That's why I have a lot of respect for how a company like The Information has built itself and constrained itself, honestly, around a simple but hard business model, which is getting people to pay directly to access high quality journalism about, the technology industry. And, that has constrained their growth. I give them a ton of credit, right? But they're far smaller as a company than they could have been if they pulled all the levers that they had. I don't know if that was intentional, but I'm positive it could have been a far bigger company than it is now. I mean, it's very successful. I give them all the credit in the world.
And basically, in the last 10 minutes, you have already answered a question that I wanted to ask you, but I will reframe it. You talk to a lot of publishers, media companies, media groups. You run the reports. Are there any business models, any strategies, any approaches that you particularly love and think, okay, this could really make a difference?
Look, I mean, I think that this is a time where there's a lot of advantages to be leaner. A lot of these organizations are mired. A lot of the legacy organizations, and it used to be legacy. We were talking about magazines. Now we're talking about digital is now legacy, right? And a lot of these organizations are still mired in cost-cutting mode, in shrinking mode, in reorg mode, and it's just hard to get back into a growth, mode. I mean, that's why we're like doing an event in November in New York. It's the second one we've done. It's like the New Growth Agenda is what it's called, and it's bringing together 40 C-level executives in media owners in order to like discuss the sort of way ahead, because you have to get back into growth mode, right? And even look, I mean, like someone like Axios, which has been one of the real success stories. They had to do deep cuts, right? You saw the Washington Post with ARC. Those are really deep cuts, and that was Jeff Bezos is running. He owns this company, so if you own it, you run it, right? He might be on his yacht down here in Miami, but if you own it, you run it. And he's struggled to make these models work, right? And acting like a tech company by spinning off ARC, that looked great for a while, and the market has changed, and so they have to respond to it. But to me, the most promising models are tend to be smaller. They tend to be focused on niche areas, and let's be real, media exists as one node in a far larger content space, right? If you're in news, you're just part of an information space. You're jostling with all kinds of people. If you're in lifestyle, you're up against every single Instagram influencer. You're up against every single TikTok star. The media industry itself has been shrunken in the role it plays in culture and society. And so therefore many of these businesses were architected at a time when media there wasn't necessarily the content space and the information space. There was just media, and they were the ones who ruled it. And this is an unfortunate, I don't even know if it's unfortunate, but this is just a period of adjustment to a new reality. I don't see a return, right, to a time when big media companies were all powerful. I don't think that is going to happen. There will be exceptions. The New York Times is going to be fine. The FT has a great niche, but El País is still going to be a big newspaper. But, I think overall, it's just hard for me to see that this is not, something that will continue. And it'll sort of course correct a little bit. I don't think everyone's getting their news from TikTok in 5 years or anything like that. But I don't see the overall industry becoming necessarily at least in the concentrated top end, I don't see. I just see more competition coming.
And I ask myself, maybe we have too many media companies around. Who says that we need
Probably.
millions of news media companies? Well, I mean, now I don't want to go into controversy. Obviously, it's very important. What I mean is the fact that there are a lot of smaller companies suffering doesn't mean that the future cannot be still.
So it's the classic thing, you don't want to get caught in the middle, right? This is like a deadly time to be in the middle. Whether you're a middle manager, whether you're like, in the middle of your category, like they're going to they have gotten crushed. They're going to continue to get crushed. And the one, if you're
I thought you were optimistic.
Well, I am, but I mean that's a small part of this overall landscape. Like, I mean, I feel fairly well. I feel fairly well served, as a consumer. I really do. I have to say, throughout all this like tumult and everything, and I know when some, publication closes, there's a ritualistic aspect of mourning it, and
I agree.
But the reality is, they were second tier, third tier, and the reason that they didn't make it, despite all the autopsy stories, which I love to read, is because people didn't find them essential, right? I just don't think that is an excuse. Like nobody, you don't deserve a media company. Like you have to make it work. Like, I don't understand what other industry, all those coal plants have been closed down. Nobody is like gnashing their teeth at this stuff. Like, this is just how the economy works. And I feel like there's a sense of entitlement to some degree of, oh, no. Like, we're not part of like the overall economy. We don't have to like be exposed to the vicissitudes of the market, and that's just not in America. Like that's never gonna happen.
Yes, I mean, and there are situations where I'm saying, well, journalism and media don't need charity; they need strong, solid strategies, because supporting journalism cannot be charity. That would collapse sooner or later as a model.
And look, that's exactly it. Like the Rebooting is part of this future of news initiative that Stagwell is putting together. I was actually going to be over there for the event that is on Thursday, actually, tomorrow. But I wasn't able to make it. But they're having like lots of these events. They've done a lot of good research around this, and look, it proves out that that advertising on news is not going to hurt brands, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Look, I think a lot of this is, news publishers can't sort of guilt trip, marketers into quote unquote supporting them necessarily. Like, they have to create economic value. They have to, look at 100%. Like the YouTube. Remember the YouTube boycotts? Those were short-lived. Why is that? Because advertisers had to use YouTube. YouTube had all the leverage in that. They made a few little changes or anything like this. I mean, look at how Instagram is finally doing stuff. I mean, parents just hate these social apps, in my view. And they're finally taking rudimentary steps. Why have their ad businesses been like off the charts? I mean, they're like addicting people. They're causing like all kinds. They got self-harm. They got all kinds of issues. And meanwhile, I'm talking to a major publisher the other day, and like something like they're being 40% of their like pages or home pages is being blocked by these quote unquote brand safety vendors.
And we reopened. This opens another conversation that in itself could take hours. The brand safety is a nonsense. Is a nonsense because
I'm not getting any of those sponsorship dollars. That's okay.
No, but I'm saying brand safety lies at domain level, at media brand level. It doesn't lie at keyword level, at page level. A certain news on a certain brand is a different thing than the same news on a very low quality website. But also at the same time, this is a byproduct of belonging to the programmatic open marketplace, where the rubbish goes in by design and it gets filtered out by design with a lot of unintended consequences. That's
Right.
why the future should be quality, tier one, curated marketplace, media alliance, call it whatever you want, but where you know that there is quality. And also I think that you can't take the audience for stupid by thinking, well, if I visit a news site, well, why should I be surprised of finding certain type of news? And do they think that there is no um, capability of the audience to distinguish between the ad and the content? I
No, I
find
think the
it really
research.
artificial.
I think the research shows that pretty clearly, right? And then when you talk with a lot of marketers, right, they're like, "I love news. I love this major news CRO was like telling me how they, they talk with like the CMOs. They're like, oh, I love X publication, right, and everything, and the CRO is like, you're blocking ads on appearing on us, and they have no idea. And the reality is, go through like the Group M spending report. When you get to like open web news stuff, it's like page 67. These things are, the reality is, again, that's what I go back to the shrunken position, is these are not critical to these businesses. So what happens is, on the agency level, the agencies are just trying to get put off the day they get fired, right? And the clients have ground them down so much on margins that the accounts are understaffed, and they have very junior people. I keep hearing for 15, 20 years about this 25-year-old media planner who I guess should be 45 now, but they just keep recycling new ones. And they have to put in very blunt tools, right, in order to make sure that they don't get the freaking screenshots sent to them over the weekend and end up like hastening the day they get fired.
Yes,
right?
but
And
this is
it makes no sense. Everyone agrees that it makes no sense, but these were the incentives set up by this system.
sure, but this is when the responsibility of the media owner comes in, because if you accept to and the original scene of the programmatic open marketplace, all this happens in the programmatic open marketplace. So if you, as a quality premium media brand, accept to legitimize that programmatic open marketplace environment and diluting your value and
But this is a short term. That stuff, it's easy. Again, I go back to like the New York Times. When I fire up the app, okay, they've got plenty of bottom of the barrel programmatic ads on that after making a big deal about quitting programmatic. I'm sure there's some sort of excuse they have, but the bottom line is, it's indirect, it is low quality, and it goes straight to the bottom line, right? If you don't fill that, then just filling it with, getting $1 CPM, that's going straight to the bottom line. And that's the decision that publishers inevitably make. And I find it like, I don't know any other industry where, they're dependent on publishers, and publishers really kind of like, most of them that I talk to, they would rather not to be working with any of these people, to a degree. It's a very strange ecosystem. That's all I have to say about it.
But back to what we said earlier, Ben Walmsley, MD of the Sun, has been here talking about how they reduced the ad load, they changed the formats, they removed the content recommendation, but that was based on a strategy. That was based on
Yeah.
on test and learn, on experimenting. That's where, I mean, yes, journalism and media and quality media is very important, but we need solid strategies and solid implementations behind.
Yeah. I mean,
Which,
someone like the Sun is always going to be pretty programmatic driven now, right?
yes, but they have done a very, very good job in in reducing the number of ads, in improving the user experience, in
Look,
improving
again, like,
the formats,
Meredith,
recirculating their own content instead of having MFAs appearing.
yeah. Look, Dotdash Meredith is a sign that you can do this at a large scale, right? I mean, they have a ton of intent data, so they've like almost a quote unquote unfair advantage in this, but it is a sign that like programmatic can work, right? Using the pipes and the extra demand from programmatic can absolutely work with, you know, what I would say is a pretty good user experience, at least in comparatively, right? And it can also work with business results. If you look at their business results, at least for now, you know, they got whacked a little bit like a year ago, but you know, they're back on a growth path. Their sessions are growing, and their revenue per session is growing. So, you know, it's possible to make this stuff work. But like you said, you need to have a strategy, a clear strategy, and they do. And you need to be able to execute on that strategy. Simple, but hard.
To close this great conversation, I'll give you $1 million to invest on a media company under the condition that if it hasn't grown by 2027, you will return the money.
Oh, I would just
Which one would you pick?
The Rebooting LLC easily. I mean, it's not even close. Like, I mean, I know, like, even in this like difficult market, like I'm very confident that, you know, we will continue to grow, and I would expect it to return well in excess of like 50% by 2027.
I agree, and I'm more than happy that you will invest.
I mean, I wouldn't invest.
I
wouldn't invest, but I would invest. Like, I mean, honestly, I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but kind of not, because I believe in the business, obviously, and also I have, you know, control over, you know, making that work. I mean, I don't investing in some other company. You don't have a lot of leverage. You don't have a lot of control over whether that returns. I mean, that's why investors have to invest in so many different companies. So, you know, investing in one company seems to be like a really bad. It would be like buying one stock. Like, I don't know. I would rather have a portfolio, or I would rather just, you know, invest in myself, right? Like.
And as a member of your audience, I pretty agree with your choice of investing my $1 million on the rebooting. Thank you very much, Brian, and hopefully see you soon.
Yeah, I'm glad we got this done.